Welcome to The Wave, we are Voices of Ecology, a movement powered by the European Union ERASMUS Plus program. Wave brings youth voices to the forefront, from real-life interviews with youth in the eco-village movement to exploring the growth in youth perspectives on intergenerational fairness. We are a multi-host podcast where each episode is unique and is hosted by a different Wave participant. With a rotating format, a diversity of voices, perspectives and passions, Wave brings them all to the mic. Join us as we dive into bold conversations, share inspiring stories, and explore how we can all lead more sustainably.
With that in mind, how do you think that young Ukrainians now are being impacted differently than older generations?
Yeah, it's a good question because I mentioned it at the beginning, but I currently study in Italy, and so I'm starting to get more aware of European context, or at least the local context of Italy. And I realized that what people get wrong a lot about Ukraine is that because of the communist past, of Soviet Union past, actually modern generations didn't participate that much in economic boom that Europe experienced, for example. And the same in 60s when it was a boom, let's say in Italy, Ukrainians were living in the same conditions that they were during Soviet Union. So it is not exactly the same. Let's say in Europe, it's easier to say that some generations benefited more from certain economic system in place, such as capitalism. But in Ukraine, sadly, it's not the case. Maybe for the best in climate perspective, but for the conditions of life, I would say Ukrainian old generations actually didn't have as good life as we could have attributed to people who were born and lived in European Union. And now I would say that modern generations, youngsters in Ukraine, they sadly carry out exactly the same weight, or even worse, because back in time, there was a lot of uncertainty since the beginning of history of modern Ukraine. And ever since there was a lot of uncertainty, there were a lot of political changes, economical changes, a lot of instability. And Ukraine, just as the rest of the world, have experienced pandemic, which was devastating. And just as we started to recover, Russia started full-scale invasion. But I just want to mention that actually Russian aggression started in 2014 when they annexed Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk under the Sham referendum statement.
Yeah.
And so this really, even me, I'm 27, and this impacted my life to the extent that you would not be able to describe to somebody on a casual day, let's say. But definitely it was not easy to go through growing up knowing that you're living in economic instability, political instability, and then you realize that you're also affected by this globalization problems, so pandemic, capitalist system which is destructive to the environment per se, extractivism, and then experiencing the fact that your country status can be questioned and some territories can be annexed and your future could be crossed in a matter of one day. Very heavy burden to carry, and I'm already old enough to understand certain things about how to handle it. But I believe younger people in Ukraine definitely have to deal with something unprecedented. And losing, for example, I was thinking about it, and we lose connection to our elders or to our families because of separation that could be caused exactly by the war. So some of us might have chosen to study abroad at this period, or I started my studies just a few months before the full-scale invasion started. I was doing my master's degree. And there are so many more things that I didn't plan and forecast in the future back in 2021. But now we're here, and I realized that young people nowadays have way more challenges to face than people of the older generation, because to contrast, in the past, my parents had the stability of Soviet Union, though there were a lot of things that came with it, which was devastating for Ukraine. For everyday person, it gave sort of a vision of stability, as if everything stays the same. There is the same routines you have to do. You have to perform your work in the same way, and then you're going to get some reward. Then things crashed as soon as we became independent. and there was a new restart of this modern Ukraine identity, and modern generation, me included. So generation of modern Ukraine now have to think about not only about I believe that we never really experienced a moment of stability properly. There were not few years when we said, okay, the future is clear. This is what I'm going to do. But maybe in some way it's for the best, because we constantly, I believe, me as a part of Active Youth in Ukraine, and other people I met after me, we kept on imagining what we want, because we knew that we don't want something that our parents had, and we definitely don't want something that is politically trying to be prescribed for us. And so I think that the modern Ukrainian is somebody who's willing to change and do whatever needed to gain on this ideal life that we hope to get somehow. But it also means that we have done too much sacrifice, and I think we grew up too fast. And I think that we didn't have this light and bright times like some people, the kids born in European Union might have had of our age. And with this comes a big responsibility, but also a great opportunity. So we're fully aware that depending on our choices, our country's future will be defined. And it's mainly young people who get to move the country in the right direction.
Yeah.
But it's definitely really hard to outweigh it, because there was never a moment when we really had lived in the conventional life of our age. And there have been so many challenges that were called upon the young person. And just imagine what you lived through up until you were 17, and a lot of uncertainty about the future. And now multiply it per 10. This is what we're living now. And I think that a lot of people are just forced to, be brave, be ambitious, and just say, okay, what do I want? If I get to choose, and it was not my choice to have to choose, but now I have to choose what I want for my country. And I'm being called upon to make this choice. And I guess this is weird, because we have to talk to people who are older than us and try to reason with them, saying that there is no return. It was never good, and there is no return back to how it used to be, however stable it felt, and that we need to keep on moving forward, and we cannot revert back, because there is no way back. And just as people worldwide understand, climate change is a huge issue for everybody worldwide. We all feel it. We all know that something has to be done with it. And you see the urge that we all feel as young people to move towards better life for the planet and for other species and for future generations. And so I feel like this is the feeling that surrounds the climate change movement is something similar that we feel in Ukraine towards our own country, and a lot of responsibility and weight that comes with it. And sorry if I got too introspective on this, but
No, not at all.
guess
Not at all. No, I was going to say. I mean, I am not looking for a reason to interrupt you, but I very much can appreciate like the sense of duty almost, and the responsibility, which is huge. And so something that you already mentioned a bit, but what role do you think older generations can play in like the fight for intergenerational equity? Like what do we need from older people? What do you need from older Ukrainians?
I would say from local people, so from older Ukrainians of generation of my parents and generations that came before my parents, I think that we need to talk about really give the advocacy role to youth and really allow them to try doing something different, something better, something slightly unconventional, because the world, not just Ukraine, will never be the same. So the world before Russian invasion was relatively stable, predetermined, economical space, political space, which was relatively predictable. But now things changed, and things change, and we see it, and the world stability is crumbling into pieces. So we see other parts of the world, not only Europe, but Asia. We see US. We see implications of this world order crumble. And I think this is very important to realize that we're most probably never going to be back to how we used to be before. But it means that we also have a great chance to keep on moving forward. And I think that for Ukrainian older generations, I feel like they need to reach out more to across the board, try talking to youth, try and talking to also European colleagues. So start to open up this incubators of the ideas and start to really brainstorm and not just to hold to the old ways of doing things, which work so far. But in the world of future, I don't think we can stick to the ways how we used to do our economic activity, for example. We need to find another way. We need to find some other approach. And I think to the older people of Europe, I would say, we need to ask ourselves the question, since the world is so interconnected, what can we do about environmental damages caused to Ukraine, for example? What can we actively do to mitigate the damages that are being caused, and they're severe, to our environment? And how can we help young people to connect, to support each other, and to be able to build something better? And I guess just reflecting on it, really talking to those who suffer through unimaginable loss and pain and still are hopeful and keep on moving forward, to support this momentum, to try to open the opportunity and keep on being welcoming, being open, try to get the resource that maybe is lacking from Ukrainian side. Because I met quite a lot of young people, but they don't feel like they have the resource, whether financial or the knowledge capacity to be able to move forward. And so encouraging them and enabling them with also providing the space, it's very important, because this boosts a trust and it builds community. And the future of the world will be after the community. So we have to be, as a community, united, and we have to be clearly aimed, and we need to be very well composed around what we want. And we also need to really get to reimagine. I feel we need to rethink about how, coming back to the beginning, what we discussed, how can humanity reconnect again to the nature, and how can we put it in perspective of a partner of equal. And similarly, how do we really move forward from this point where we realize that nothing will be the same as it used to be again, and
maybe
what
that's
do we
okay.
want from it? And it's okay. I think it's totally
nothing. Yeah, exactly. Nothing's gonna be the way it ever was again, and maybe that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that we should be very brave as well. We need to be really, really brave and say and speak out loud when things don't work, and say that it doesn't work. But maybe there is another way. And when people have a proposals, just try to go with it. Try to test it. Try to figure out if this is something that works. And it's okay to fail. I think this is very important, because you can never get it from the first try. But the same, like with when we talk about intergenerational equity, or when we talk about environmental recovery, or we talk about the war and trying to recover from that, there is not really one right answer. There has to be, there are so many, there's almost like multiverse of solutions that are out there. And it really depends on who are the people, which is the territory, what are resources available. We can do a lot of things. So I guess it's more about us being able to discuss it openly and really condemn when things don't work, and be honest about it, and try to move on from this, and really encourage trying something new, really. And I think it's important to just acknowledge now that the world will never be the same, but we will get this great opportunity to do something better.
And I think that is a message that I think is very important, one that we would love to have throughout all of our podcasts here. I guess for a closing couple questions, if you could implement one policy to start tomorrow to improve intergenerational equity in Ukraine, what would it be?
I think that if me as Anna would get to choose, I would say I would put definitely somehow I would make sure that environment will be protected and for the years to come. And so I would have insisted on making sure that we start to put environmental protection as a priority. So knowing how much of our environment and nature is being destroyed every day in Ukraine these days, I would really want to put the way to make sure, maybe even set in Ecocide, though we have it in our legislation already, but expanding this definition and creating almost a methodology saying, okay, we get to prosecute you for this type of crimes of damage to
Yep.
the environment. And maybe second, I would imagine if I would answer as Ukrainian, I think this is on everybody's mind. You know, Ukraine now suffers from a lot of challenges that comes with moving due to the war. And so there's a lot of aspects that we didn't discuss yet, but you know, the fact that we have less young people currently staying in Ukraine, me included, for example, doing studies or maybe having to be forcefully moved because their mother have moved, so they are living now abroad. There's definitely a brain drain. So we have the less intellectuals or people who could hypothetically have taken over certain innovation sectors, maybe being now currently abroad doing business and trying to survive. And maybe it's not really a matter of choice, but this is where we are now at this moment. And I think so a lot of people would tell you that the thing that we really need to consider for the policies for this intergenerational equity is also finding the way to rebalance this and doing the integration for Ukrainians who would be ready to come back home from abroad and use the knowledge that they have gained from being abroad for the sake of recovering Ukraine and doing the reconstruction. And so this idea of this integration has already been pushed in Ukrainian government. They definitely have this reintegration incentives that they started to put. Like for the first time in history of modern Ukraine, we are allowed to have two nationalities, which was not the case up until a few weeks ago. So it's something new, and I think it's just encouraging people to let's say retain their nationality and identity. So not to have to raise it by having, let's say, chosen to stay somewhere abroad and maybe getting an opportunity to get nationality of this European country, but also being able to stay Ukrainian and, you know, being able to participate in Ukraine's economy, so pay taxes, to be able to do business activity, to be able to afford housing, which is a big problem now in Europe. And if Ukraine does it right, I think if we would have done this right, I think it could be a turning pivotal point for us to reintegrate those that we lost, to bring back all of these people who really love their country but just are either too scared or cannot come back for whatever reasons. Maybe it is too traumatic. Maybe they lost everybody they loved and they simply cannot imagine coming back. There is a lot behind, and you need to ask person by person why they choose to stay abroad, why each person chooses to stay abroad. But I think making a successful reintegration program would be absolute key to revert it, you know, to still allow youth to be in charge of the country and stop this trend of getting older population growth. So starting to have bigger proportion of older people versus young people. So maybe this would be the policy. I would say a lot of Ukrainians will tell you we really need to consider and focus upon if we talk about this aspect of how do we rebalance.
Okay, thank you, and thank you also for shedding light on such a critical issue and the writing that you do. And I think also from our discussion now, you're called to be brave. Also, despite with everything that's going on, I think with the war as with the fight for the climate for the future generations, it is really important. So thank you for your time today, and hope that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, guys.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Anna.
Thanks for listening to the Wave podcast. We are Voices of Ecology. Stay tuned and subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episodes. If you are inspired to act, share, and learn more, connect with us. Follow us on Instagram at WaveProjectEU. And share the episode with another person today. Every beat helps keep the wave moving forward.